Smoak.
Joseph Duarte Houston Chronicle covers University of Houston and much more in that big monstrous city to the southeast of us. Joseph with Craig and Paul, David Smoak on 365 Sports. So did you ever have on your bingo card that there would be a discussion about the University of Houston taking on the NFL with Columbia blue jerseys?
No, probably not. And, this has been a more than a year-long saga in terms of wanting to do something, being told you can't do something. It's like the kids and the parents tell you, hey, you can't do that. Well, Houston's playing the role of the kid and well, we're going to go do that. So, it's kind of crazy with the alternate jerseys that you're speaking of and the blue kind of Oiler theme look. But it's going to happen in Houston probably here in the next year, year or less.
Do you think that obviously Chris Peasant wouldn't do it if he didn't think he had some sort of leg to stand on and they could make some sort of modification that would find them out of the copyright? Do you think they have a good shot at winning that?
Yeah, they wouldn't go forward if they didn't think so. And I think it comes down to, a lot of people say, well, what right does the NFL or the Tennessee Titans franchise have to a specific color? And in this case, it's not Columbia blue that Houston is using. They're calling it Houston blue. It's a slight variation. At the same time, they've also done some modifications with the striping on the sleeves, on the pants. And frankly, they don't use the oil derrick. They use a script Houston on the helmet. So there's plenty of ways around it that they feel. And, oh, by the way, Ole Miss, Louisiana Tech, a lot of other schools, Drake in basketball has done it. They don't feel like what they're doing is any different than schools that are already doing it and have been permitted. So, yeah, they do feel like they have a good case.
I guess my only question on the uniforms, and I'm glad that they're doing what they're doing. I think it's great. I think they're great alternates and love the look. But I know a big point of contention last year, Joseph, was, hey, the NFL says you can wear these, but you can't sell any merchandise. Are they going to sell merchandise with the blue color, or is that maybe treading too much and then asking for some legal action?
No, I think this is all in.
Okay.
And Chris Peasant didn't specifically address that because first they're getting through the design phase, but I cannot see a scenario that they would roll out something so popular. And he even mentioned the overwhelming response that it got back in September when they rolled it out, that it sounds very certain that there will be some type of selling of merchandise that will go along with this.
Joseph, looking at Houston, Willie Fritz first year, I know they've had players enter the portal. I know he made some comments about that was to be expected anytime there's a coaching change. Where would you say they are based on the comings and the goings with the moving forward now that this transfer portal window is closed?
Well, coming into Willie Fritz's first year, looking at the roster and what he inherited, there were going to be a lot of holes that they've had to fill through the portal since he got here in December. And like you said, they're no different than a lot of schools in terms of losing guys to the portal. And I think that number gets magnified because of what that number is. But you look at what they've lost, certainly losing Sam Brown, their leading receiver, to Miami was a big blow. This week they lose a starting cornerback who had a team-high 4 interceptions. And maybe with the exception of one other defensive lineman, a lot of these guys weren't on the 2-deep post-spring. So I think what they end up having to do, guys, between now and when the portal activity ends, is you gotta add some depth. The defense right now only had 2 starters, 3 with Hamilton coming back. So that was going to be a lot of new faces. And then you look at the old line and you take away, anything with the skill positions, you're going to have to replace 4 offensive linemen. So, yeah, there were going to be changes to begin with. So I don't think the portal has necessarily just taken them down a complete notch or anything. They were already starting over in a lot of areas.
Do you think that even though they've lost some talent, you could see an uptick in the record just because of the way that there might be new chemistry in the team. And, Dana was just kind of seemed exhausted at the end of all that.
I do. And, the schedule's tough. I mean, they didn't catch any breaks for year one with Willie Fritz. So that's one thing you have to navigate. I think if you do some things you didn't do last year, namely beat Rice in non-conference and possibly put yourself to win the UNLV game as well, and go 2-1 in non-conference, there's some opportunities there. I think this is a 5 to 6 win team in year one, and that's not a knock on Willie. It's to your point. You allude to Dana's last year and the last few months where you go from a high of almost beating Texas to some really just rough showings to end the year, and then you finish 4-8. I think what you'll see the biggest improvement is just the overall look of this team, the discipline, the support that it's going to get, and then you hope by year two and certainly in year three, you're back into postseason talk, bowl talk, and sort of go from there.
How surprising was the Sam Brown departure? I mean, they obviously lost Matthew Golden to Texas pretty early on in the December period, but I don't know. Was there something kind of leading up to that? Was that much of a surprise?
No, not at all. In fact, the last week of the spring, Sam was looking really good out there, and to my knowledge, there wasn't one moment that he just said, I'm done with it. And I think what happened was when the spring ended and you start having those talks and the kids start evaluating things, he basically thought that, hey, I can go somewhere else. I think NIL, even though people won't say it, that certainly is a huge factor these days. And Kelvin's seeing that on the basketball side and having to retain players that are getting potentially poached. So I think you get a little bit of that, and maybe a guy wanting to go somewhere else. He wasn't recruited or played for this coaching staff, and that's just the way it happened. But yeah, to answer your question, I was a little bit surprised that he did it this late. I thought he might have done it at the end of last season, like Matthew Golden did. But that was sort of a really tough one for them this late in the process.
Joseph, basketball-wise, outside of losing Shed, everything appears to be hunky-dory in the retention department for Kelvin Sampson, and I'm sure that they're not done yet because, there's a lot of guys who still haven't made their decision, but could the offseason have gone any more according to plan than it did?
This was an A for them in the offseason, and we were joking with Kelvin that, the last few years, one of his talking points has been that, hey, we have to replace 4 guys every year, and, we're still in this position. Well, they didn't have to replace 4 guys this year. They actually kept 4 guys, and, the only one they replaced is a big one in Jamal Shed, the All-American point guard. But, yeah, this is going to be a different offseason. They are done roster-wise. They're at 14. They're one over the scholarship limit, and, the way teams are doing it nowadays, that last spot will probably be a combination of NIL money factoring in where, you can help offset some of the scholarship costs. But, I mean, they've got no room now to do anything roster-wise. The big pickup was getting Milos Uzan from Oklahoma. He'll be the replacement for Shed at point guard. You get L.J. Cryer back and Dajuan Roberts. Though that was 2 big deals. And then injury-wise, you get back Terrence Arsenal and JoJo Tugler. So they're in really good shape, and that's the reason I've seen them, 1-2 in the early preseason polls for next year.
Joseph, thank you very much. Great to have you on. Joseph Duarte, Houston Chronicle on the football, looking back at the first spring with Willie Fritz, and also what Paul just mentioned, Kelvin Sampson, and then also what's going on with the uniforms. Craig's going to get more into that in about an